What's up, everyone? Welcome to the April 26th edition of DraftKings Tournament Plays presented by PrizePicks. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And as a reminder, you get 1 free month of Awesemo plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at PrizePicks. Be sure to use the code Awesemo to receive a 100% first deposit bonus up to $100. We have an 11-game MLB slate tonight. Nice to get a larger slate size. It gives you, it typically is going to allow you to get to some better teams that still aren't going to be that popular. Generally, I think a little bit more fun experience than going to the worst offenses on the slate in an attempt to be different. So I enjoy slates of this size. 11 games is a pretty nice one. Starting with the top tournament stacks on DraftKings using the top stacks tool on Awesemo.com. Then we'll take a look at 3 of the top tournament pitchers using the top pitchers tool. But starting with the top tournament stacks, coming in at number 3, the Los Angeles Angels projected for 2% aggregate ownership with a 4% chance of being the top scoring stack. They're taking on the Cleveland Guardians and Tristan Mckenzie. Mckenzie is a promising prospect. He throws hard, gets a lot of strikeouts. At times, he has issues with his control. He seemingly fixed those last year, but this year so far, he's back to walking 12% of hitters while striking out 30%. Has a respectable 3.76 xFIP so far. He's just someone that typically he's going to be good, and he's difficult to hit against, but he can certainly put extra guys on base, and if he does, things can get kind of ugly in a hurry. Another reason I think to kind of like a team like the Angels is that we are just seeing such a decrease in offense this year. In previous years, you really, especially on DraftKings, but regardless of site, you really were going to win based on how many home runs you got. And so even if you're facing a pitcher that's going to walk guys and put guys on base and maybe doesn't walk a fine line and give up some extra runs, that wasn't necessarily that useful because you really just needed a bunch of home runs, and walks and RBI singles and doubles weren't going to get you there. This year, though, guys just aren't hitting home runs. The ball's not carrying. The weather hasn't warmed up either. So I think that it does make it a little bit more palatable to go to a team and just say, look, hopefully they score 5 or 6 runs, 1 or 2 guys homer, but you just get some singles, some RBI doubles, and you put runs together that way. I think that's how teams can get to Mckenzie if he is putting extra guys on base. The Angels have a 4.2 implied run total. Shohei Ohtani not pitching tonight, so he is playable as well. That always helps in addition. Number 2, the Miami Marlins, projected for 4% aggregate ownership with a 5% chance of being the top scoring stack. They are facing Josiah Gray and the Washington Nationals. This is another spot kind of similar to the Mckenzie spot in that Gray is a bit of an unknown commodity. He's still a young pitcher. He has certainly shown signs of talent and promise, including this season. So far, he has struck out 30. Sorry, I lost. Yes, sorry, I lost it. 31% of hitters, 3.58 xFIP, but he's also walked 12.1% of the hitters he's faced. He's also allowed 1.2 home runs per 9 innings. Miami certainly doesn't have the best offense, but you do have Jazz Chisholm at the top who has power. And then you also have some power with guys like Aguilar and Soler and Jesus Sanchez. So not the worst lineup, even though they do only have a 3.9 implied run total. Gray is, I think, a boom or bust pitcher, and that makes the opposing offense somewhat appealing at low ownership. And number 1, the Houston Astros, getting a bit more ownership than Miami or the Angels, but deservedly so. They also have a better lineup. They're projected for 9% aggregate ownership with a 10% chance of being the top scoring stack. They have a 4.5 implied run total as they take on Taylor Hearn tonight in Texas. There's just a lot of power from the right side in the Houston lineup. Granted, it's not as good as it would be when we're fully healthy. It doesn't have Correa anymore either, but you still have Bregman, Alvarez, Kyle Tucker in the middle of this order. You add in guys like McCormick, who's cheap and at the top of the order most likely, Michael Brantley, who's just a good overall hitter, Yuli Gurriel, who just gets on base, puts the ball in play. It's a pretty formidable lineup, even without guys like Altuve currently and Correa, now permanently. Just a pretty good spot for them going up against Taylor Hearn in Texas. So that was the top 3 stacks. Now taking a look at the top 3 pitchers on tonight's slate. Number 3, Josiah Gray in that matchup against the Marlins. I said when talking about Miami that Gray is a boom or bust pitcher, gets a lot of strikeouts, walks a lot of guys, struggles with home runs at times. That's good on both sides. And right now he's only projected for 6% ownership with a 13% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He has a 3.58 xFIP so far this year, as I mentioned, 31% strikeout percentage. There's no doubting the upside there. He's thrown at least 80 to 90 pitches in all 3 of his starts as well. So there's no reason to think that he's on any sort of significant pitch count restriction either. The one thing to keep an eye on is the weather here. This game right now looks like it should be okay, but definitely keep an eye on that. There is some rain in the Mid-Atlantic in general and Washington specifically. Number 2, Chris Bassett, $9,800 price tag, taking on the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have a 3.5 implied run total. Bassett has thrown at least 90 pitches in all 3 of his starts this year, so that's good to see. Just somebody that you can be confident is going to be allowed to work deep into games. He has struck out 28.6% of hitters, 2.9 xFIP. Pretty decent spot here. Only projected for 3% ownership because of the increased price tag, but a 16% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. Makes me want to get there at that ownership. And number 1, Kevin Goffman, only $8,700 taking on the Boston Red Sox. Goffman is projected for 16% ownership, but has a 20% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on DraftKings. Goffman is off to an excellent start this season. I had some concerns with him coming over to a new team and to the American League East both, just because he's someone who's been so finicky over the course of his career, where he seems like he figures it out and then falls off of a cliff. I was pretty nervous with him, A, leaving a team that clearly he had figured it out with, and then B, getting out of San Francisco, the most favorable pitcher's park in baseball, and going into a division where you're facing good offenses and typically good hitters parks. But he's been great so far this year. 30.1% strikeout percentage, has not walked a hitter yet, 1.82 xFIP, and he's thrown at least 80 pitches in all 3 of his starts. Boston, not the most intimidating lineup anymore. You do still have some good hitters in there with, guys like Rafael Devers in particular, but a little bit watered down compared to what it's been in the past, especially once you get toward the bottom of the order. You add somebody like Trevor Story in, who's a good hitter, but also strikes out a bit. So plenty of upside here for Gossman at a relatively inexpensive price tag. So to recap, the top 3 tournament stacks on DraftKings: number 3, the Los Angeles Angels; number 2, the Miami Marlins; number 1, the Houston Astros. And the top 3 tournament pitchers: number 3, Josiah Gray; number 2, Chris Bassett; and number 1, Kevin Gossman.